Welcome into the Kuharsky podcast, live from Edley's. I am at Berry Farms, just off 65 at Paytonsville Road, my home base. Edley's all over and around Nashville. Can you smell it? I'm primed for a big meal after today's special episode. Cam Ward to become a Titan tonight, shortly after 7 o'clock Central. The beginning of a new era. Questions for sure about what he will be, but tonight's the kickoff of the whole thing, and a lot of excitement here. Going to bring Blake Beddingfield, major contributor Paul Kuharsky, on board in just a second. He's obviously well versed in all of these prospects. 19-year scout with the Titan. The last 6 he was director of college scouting. He now consults with multiple teams around the NFL, is up to date on all of these guys. We will take all your questions about the drafts and about prospects. We're going to talk about Tyler Lockett, who signed with the Titans yesterday, alleviates a little bit of the pressure at the wide receiver position. What it's like in the Titans building the day of the draft, the calm before the storm, you would call it, but I'm sure it's somewhat stormy, probably not as stormy for the Titans today, knowing that they're not making a deal. Prospects to fear, Cam Ward comps, and a bunch of other stuff. And so without further ado, welcome to Cody, to Josh, to Audrey, to Joshua, to Pop. Appreciate you guys coming in. Spread the word with the retweet, and we'll bring in Blake Beddingfield. Good to see you, pal. Appreciate you spending some time with us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be on. It's draft day, so I'm excited.
So what goes on, I mean, on a typical draft day when you have a first-round pick that's not number one? I'm sure there's a lot of phone conversation and stuff. Tell us about what it's typically like in and around the draft room on the Thursday of the draft at 12:35 in the afternoon.
You know, usually I would send our scouts and some of the staff out to play golf in the morning. Today's a rainy day in Nashville, probably didn't happen, but I would send them out early in the morning because otherwise people come in the office like a regular work day and really have to wait all day for the draft. But at other times, some of the director level positions, general manager, head coach, coordinators, meet again just to kind of go over the scenarios on day one with some potential trades, that type of thing. The pro department and some of the director level people are working the phones for potential trades. And that's really what's going on today. Everything else is done. Evaluation of the players, medical, off the field, those things are done. You've already discussed if potential players may fall to you and what their value is for the team. If you're having the first pick in the draft, you know what you're doing and you're excited about it, and it's really an easy day. What you are talking about is potentially trading up in the back part of the first round to acquire a player that may fall that you consider a first round value player, someone that you would like to attach that 5th-year option to. So when you have a top pick in the second round like the Titans do, you could potentially move up. Now, it'll cost you future draft choices, but it's something you would discuss if certain players were there.
So you're setting the table for some scenarios. Jeffrey Simmons is, they've looked at some defensive tackles more than you would expect. How much do you read into that in terms of what it may mean about their willingness to trade Jeffrey Simmons? And how much do you have those conversations at this stage, if that's something you're contemplating?
I think with the Jeffrey Simmons and with his salary and kind of what he is to the team, he's still a viable part of that defense. Is he producing on the pass rush level that you would like for the money he's earning? No. Is he a really good rundown player? Absolutely. Does he demand double teams and allow other people to make plays? Sure. But is he worth the play or the money that you're paying him? I think that's what you have to discuss. That starts on the ownership level. You've told the owner that he is worth a certain amount of money, and she went out and cut that check for him. So it starts on the ownership level and has to go down the chain through not only your personnel department. Can we trade him for potentially maybe a second-round pick? Is that player going to come close to his value? Probably not. You're probably not going to get the same value player, but you're going to get a younger and a cheaper version on a team that's rebuilding. whether they discuss a rebuild or not, they're rebuilding. They're going to take a quarterback with the first pick overall who's not going to come in and win a Super Bowl in year one. They don't have the team around him to do that. So do you start to build on the defensive side with some youth as well? You had TeAndre Swift from last year who will go into his second year and was a solid piece to the defense. Can you add another player like that next to him and get a cheaper player than Jeffrey Simmons' price? I think that has to be discussed. If you don't get the value, if you're not getting the second-round pick and your player's not there, then you move on and just play with that 27-year-old Simmons and expect him and really demand him to have a better year.
Would you be inclined to try to move him? My thinking is, like, if you get a second or third for him, it's a one-for-one thing. Maybe you don't use the second or the third to replace him, but you're using one of the fourths to replace him, and you're not getting probably the same caliber player. Now you can get a better caliber player at another position with that pick, but I'd need two picks to move him, a second and a fourth or something like that. Then I might think about it, because I'm getting a 2-for-1, but I also have to take into account that I'm not necessarily hitting a home run with both those picks.
I agree with your thinking, Paul. I think it's going to take two picks to get rid of a Jeffrey Simmons, because 1-for-1, you're just not going to get the equal value of the player. Yes, you'll get a smaller contract and a younger player, but you're not going to get the production, especially the immediate production that he could give you going into his 27-year-old season. He's still a young player in the prime of his career, so he could still have some upside to him. But I think to get that player, it has to be a special one, and I don't see that happening in the second round this year. So to trade him, you're really taking a gamble, or you're saying he's just not the player or personality that we want in this locker room, which is potentially there. I would shy away from it, because the Titans are void of talent, and Jeffrey Simmons is one of your more talented players.
Yeah. Okay. Ed Henry wants to know, how would you define what the it factor is for quarterbacks that you've scouted?
I think there is an it factor, and it's something that you can't measure or time. It's a quality that they have. Some of it's production, some of it's a person that's been a winner, and why are they winner? I always say, as a scout, you have to answer a number of questions, to yourself. Why are they having success? How are they having success? Why are they not? When do they fail? You're always asking yourself a series of questions to get to the ultimate answer of what is the it factor for this player. You can go through history and look at a Lamar Jackson, who was a dynamic athlete that had to kind of improve a little bit in the passing game, but always was, if you go back to this high school or college and even early in his pro career, played with a dynamic athleticism. Andrew Luck was a player that came out and didn't have a lot of negatives to him. He was just a really prolific passer, really accurate, but a kind of an understated, I thought, an underrated athlete too, for his size and ability. And those are just two examples of players that have come out. But you look at the Trevor Lawrence, who was always a winner, middle school, high school, college, first pick in the draft, but hasn't had that consistent winning on the pro level. Other factors have played into that. 3 coaching changes in 5 years, multiple offensive coordinators, influx of different personnel based on each head coach that they've had. They've kind of, as an organization, kind of stunted his growth, so to speak, and really the organizational growth. So there isn't.
But coming out, he unquestionably had the it factor.
No question.
I mean, you could look at what's happened since, but coming out, nobody could have fault with Trevor Lawrence being rated the way he was rated.
No, you're talking a 6'6", 225-pound athlete that has only been a winner. He has the arm. He has the athleticism. He had that it factor, and it just hasn't shown consistently on the NFL level. But those are the things you're looking for. So that's why he is considered a no-doubt prospect. And
so where do we rank, putting aside his deficiencies, where do you rank Cam Ward with it factor?
I think he has, and what I like about Cam is that he's been successful on every level. Incarnate Word, he started out there, had success on that level, transfers to Washington State, had success at Washington State, and then goes to Miami and turned around a Miami program that was kind of reeling and had, again, success on that level. That's the trajectory you want to see. So what is that it factor for him? Is it leadership? Is it production? Is it just a player that knows how to win ball games and drive his teammates to win? You're seeing that a little bit. Look at the different levels. He didn't have the talent at Washington State that he had at Miami, and obviously at Incarnate Word that he had at the other two programs, but he elevated all three of those programs when he was there. Can he elevate on the next level? So he has a little bit of that it factor when you're talking about coming into the NFL. Now, different than a Trevor Lawrence who had the elite athleticism and size and the pedigree on a high level and won on a high level consistently. So I think there's a little bit different there when you're talking about a Trevor Lawrence as a prospect and a Cam Ward. But Cam Ward is a good, solid NFL prospect.
Good question here from Jason McDonald. Do you ever scout future position depth against the current class? This is what a lot of people wanted the Titans kind of to do, to eat it at quarterback in some way, shape, or form this year, because Cam Ward, though the best quarterback in this class, is not necessarily a great quarterback. And look ahead, no definite flag bearer for the best quarterback in that class, but a lot of candidates for what looks like it will be a better quarterback class. Could a team ever say, hey, we're not going to force it this year with a quarterback, and we're going to count on next year's quarterback class to be good, and we'll find one there? Or is that crazy thinking with what's in front of you now?
No, I think that's definite. And as a team, you're evaluating a year ahead. Once you get past your initial evaluations of the current draft class, when you start to get into the spring, your scouts are charged with the ability to go out and evaluate next year's draft players. You're also part of a service, like the Combine or Blesto, that put out lists for future draft choices. But as an area scout, your role is to know your area and what is there right now and what will be there next year as well. So yes, you're in charge of scouting future drafts to kind of see if you should take a year. Now, at the quarterback position, that's a little bit tough. You're getting to a point to where you hope to win a few more ball games and not pick number one next year. And if you're not picking number one, maybe you're 5, maybe you're 6, and now you're out of contention for one of those top picks. So when you got the first pick, it's better to sit and take that player. Now, the Titans front office seem to have a little bit of a potential to take a few years and build this organization. So they could have waited and maybe taken a player like a Travis Hunter instead. But, they decided to go with a quarterback, and I think that's not a bad spot at this point, because you're hoping some of those quarterbacks in that 2026 draft really you're expecting them to elevate their game. None of them are just dead set number one picks in the draft right now. Do they have potential? Absolutely.
So here Jonathan Merck hits on the big question that came out of the press conference earlier this week. And I was talking 35 and beyond when I was asking them, how does the gravitational force of your needs at edge and wide receiver not influence what you do at 35 in particular? Merck says after they made it a point to say they won't let need drive their decisions and that they'll pick the best player on the board, how do they justify drafting a quarterback because of need when, by all accounts, Cam Ward is not the best player in this draft and they're taking him at number one?
I can make the argument the Titans kind of have a need at every position, except for maybe offensive line, where they went out and got 2 free agents. One of them a little bit longer in the tooth than Kevin Zeitler, but you have a solidified 5-man offensive line. So that would maybe the only position they didn't have a need. So they really could pick any spot and really fulfill that need pick. But the way I look at it, I had Travis Hunter as the number one player in the draft. I thought that was unquestioned. Abdul Carter would be a top 3 pick in this draft, but he has a lot of concerns, not only with injuries, but off the field as well. So, that eases the ability to maybe take a quarterback, which is a need player for them, and still a first-round graded player.
So you don't have as big an issue with that. And plus, inevitably, you're scoring up a quarterback, right? You have to.
It's the number one position on every NFL team. You have to have it. If you don't have one, you're going to lose ball games. There's no question. Look at the Titans for years. They had Derrick Henry, probably the number one quarterback number one running back in the NFL, but never had the ability to get over the hump. Even when Ryan Tannehill was playing at a pretty solid level, they just never had that one guy behind under center to put him over top.
All right, we'll get back to questions. Really good questions here. I've talked at the beginning of this podcast the last couple of weeks about Ward comps that are out there. Now, this list gets incredibly long. I've seen Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Ben Roethlisberger, Steve McNair, even Patrick Mahomes. I'm wondering who you think he's like. One that I've gotten into, and it's not as much game as production. Like we've drawn a line, a couple of us at Baker Mayfield. Like if he gave you Baker Mayfield level production a little earlier, Baker Mayfield's first 2 seasons were pretty good. Then things kind of got off the rails. And where Baker Mayfield is now, we've kind of had a discussion. Would you take Baker Mayfield's career from the number 1 pick in the draft? And I say absolutely, you would take those numbers. They're superior to anything the Titans have gotten out of quarterback. But who of those guys, or who do you see as Cam Ward maybe being if he's a hit?
I've always comped him as a Baker Mayfield / Zach Wilson type prospect. Good and bad there. Zach had a lot of talent, a lot of arm talent. You saw him make plays off script at times, but he just didn't have the body of work that Cam has. And I'm talking about in college. I like the comp with Baker Mayfield for the good and bad reasons. There's a lot of success there, playing out of pocket at times, on the roll, just improvising, being instinctive, doing things like that. But I also see him doing things where he trusts his arm too much, floating in the pocket, throwing off his backside. Too many inconsistencies that Baker struggled with his first 3 years in the league. He has now tightened that up. And maybe it was a different locations, different coaching staffs, that type of thing. But he struggled with that early on with the Browns. So, it's one of those things. I've always liked the Baker Mayfield for him, similar in size, similar in arm strength, in the way he can throw with different arm angles. And Cam does that and has success with it. The Zach Wilson thing is a little bit more of the arm strength and the arm talent that you see flashes of, but some of the inconsistencies as well.
All right, we'll pause 1 second. I'll bring Blake back in just a second. I don't want you to see him salivating as I talk about the lunch special here at Edley's, which is the Peppa Pig sandwich. Listen to this: pork sirloin, bacon, barbecue mustard, fried cheese on garlic bread. Wow. You can get this at any of the Edleys around Middle Tennessee. I'm in Berry Farms in Franklin. You got Franklin in the Factory. You've got 5 Points in East Nashville, where my man Leon will make you an awesome margarita to go with that. Sylvan Park, Donaldson, Gallatin, 12 South, and Nolansville. Peppa Pig, pork sirloin, bacon, barbecued mustard, fried cheese on garlic bread. What more could you want for lunch? Terrific, terrific sounding sandwich. I'm judging whether I'm going to dive all the way in on that, but I've got 40 minutes roughly, and the temptation is strong. The force of that sandwich is strong. Edley'sBarbecue.com. Check it out. You can get a look at their menu. You can get the addresses to all of those locations. I'm sure you could smell through this broadcast on YouTube or Twitter, or if you're listening later, it'll come through your headphones, through your car speakers, on Apple, on Spotify, on iHeart, where you need to subscribe, like, rate, review, thumbs up, all of those things you can do. Edley's Barbecue, proud sponsor of the Paul Kuharsky podcast. Treat them right. They treat us right. We'll bring Blake Beddingfield back in and continue with a lot of your great questions. How good does that sandwich sound, Blake?
I'm an Edley's 12 South guy. I've taken the entire family there. My daughter really loves it. Actually, my mother-in-law likes it as well. Yeah. So you can make the mother-in-law happy, and she's always happy.
Always good.
South Edley, so
can't go wrong. Jay Glazer put out a note. Jordan Pace is bringing this up that he's finding as he talks to people that there's kind of a new category as people take people down their boards or even cross them off. We've always had the medicals and the characters, but now with NIL, he's finding teams are talking to him about guys who just don't love ball. They've made money already, and they see the financial thing, and they see it as a paycheck deal where they can report to work and get their money, but they don't necessarily have to invest in it the way maybe guys knew they had to invest in it in the past. How much you get a sense of that being a factor out there in the scouting community as people are looking at these guys?
No question about it. You see it with the NIL world collectives. You see the multiple transfers when they're unhappy. All of a sudden, you're seeing 3 and 4, sometimes 4 transfers on a player. And it's just because they're consistently unhappy with what they're being paid or how they're being treated. Well, that's not going to change when they get to the NFL level. Now you're just getting to evaluate it on the college level. Used to in the NFL before collectives, you had 1 transfer maybe. If it was a 2 transfer, you needed to question the kid. And now you're seeing 2 to 3 transfers, and that's commonplace. So the love of the game is very important because they've already made, some players have made a significant amount of money. How important is it to them to win ball games and have success? Or is it more important for them to just continue to make money, be a stat grabber, someone that just tries to play for themselves? You're going to see that. And you see that on the college level now. And it's only going to be evaluated even more thorough as you go through the process.
A lot of people disagree with me on Will Levis. I think Will Levis clearly is the second best quarterback on the roster. I know he's been an unreliable player. He's not an ideal backup to come in and calm things down during 3 weeks that you're without your starter, or if Cam Ward needs some time to sit and watch and all of that. But Brandon Allen has no upside. No bigger ceiling. Levis can still get better. There seems to be a huge component of people that think, and some of them are well sourced, that the Titans are very anxious to get rid of Will Levis. I don't think there's going to be much that comes back in a return. I don't imagine him being a problem once it's made clear to him what the situation is. How do you feel about him being or not being on the roster going forward?
Well, I think he has to absolutely be on the roster. He's too talented to throw away. You're not going to throw him away for a 6th, 7th round draft choice, or you're not going to throw him away just because he's no longer the starter. Backups in the league, there's 2 types. There's the type of backup that can finish a game and start one game, okay? And you can have success. If you're asking a backup to start 4 or 5 games or the rest of a season, you better have somebody with the skill set that can actually be a starter in the league, or you're going to lose a lot of ball games.
And there are not many of those.
No. And that's why the Joe Flacco's of the world can continue to survive at 40 years old, because he had a skill set at one point as a starting quarterback, and he can continue to do that if you ask him to. But he's not going to be a 17-game starter in a winner. He's just not. But can he come in and win 4 or 5 ball games for you? Absolutely. Will Levis can do that. And Will Levis has shown that he's a competitor. For whatever he lacks in some of the skills to be a top-level starter, he has the athleticism. When you draw up a player as a quarterback in the NFL, he's got the arm, he's got the athleticism, he's got the size, he's got the toughness. He just lacks some other skills to make him a really top-level starter in the league. So I don't think they should pass up a talent unless there's an issue that I'm aware of in the locker room and what he would be as a backup. No, he should be on this roster.
And with all that pedigree stuff, he's now spent 6 weeks with Jordan Palmer, and he's got access to him for a year. That's a valuable thing for a guy to be doing. See what you get out of that. It's better than Brandon Allen. I mean, I don't understand. Egbuka or Burden, who would you take between the two?
Burden has the ability to be a number 1 receiver in the NFL. He hasn't shown that yet at Missouri. He came out as one of the top receivers in the country coming out of high school, and you saw flashes. But the flashes have not turned into consistent production. Now, they have moved him around a little bit. They had a quarterback issue this year at Missouri where their number 1 quarterback was injured for a number of games. But that's when a player that's going to be a number 1 receiver in the NFL elevates his game. He didn't elevate, and you want to see him elevate. Now, he's a 3-level receiver, which means he can take a screen and get yardage with it. He's an intermediate to short receiver that can be physical at the catch point, and he also has the ability to get deep on verticals. So makes him a number 1 potential receiver, but he's not that yet. But can he be a number 2 for the Titans, opposite of Calvin Ridley? Yes, and I think you have to select him. Egbuka is a good, solid receiver. You know what you're getting. Good good route runner. I think he has really good hands. He's got run after catch ability, but not the elite speed to run away or the top level strength. Good, solid player. Number 2 ceiling, on a team. So, both are solid picks. I would go with the upside in Burden, unless there's a work ethic issue and a guy that's just not going to get there. And that would be an off the field type thing. But otherwise, I take Burden and take the chance on developing a player.
What do you think about the character work ethic questions about Burden?
You see a guy that hasn't developed in 3 years to the level that was the expectations on a team that had a pretty good team, pretty good talent around him. And I said the quarterback missed some time this year, which really kind of set him back a little bit. But even when the quarterback was completely healthy, he wasn't one of the best receivers in the country. Could be, has the potential, has that ability. So what is holding him back? I didn't go into Missouri and find out, but that's what those scouts are important for. When you see misses at times, it's because the scout didn't do their homework and find out that information.
Let's keep going there. Cox asks, how often do potential prospects like Burden, who didn't become great in college, actually become great in the pros?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd have to actually think about that a little bit, but it happens sometimes. And I'll say this, and I'm not thinking of one particular person, but what happens is maybe they didn't fit the scheme. And I'll say this right now is a little bit different than it was before the collectives, where you had to transfer and sit out a year. So players just didn't transfer as much because they didn't want to sit, especially if they had NFL ability. So what happens is they had to sit through coaching changes. They had to sit through maybe a quarterback being hurt and that type of thing. So the circumstances around sometimes, I would love to have that question and think about a particular prospect, but that's a great question. But it does happen at times. I'll say that where players just didn't produce as much in college, but came to the NFL and kind of hit their stride.
Clicks.
But I'm gonna think about it while we're sitting here.
James Pierce, probably the biggest character question guy. I've heard some bad things. You and I have talked about him, but I've heard some bad things from elsewhere. How wary are you of him? He brings to mind for me, and I don't know if you put the character questions in line with Albert Haynesworth, who had an awful bad rap when the Titans drafted him. Do you see similarities there, or you think it's a different level of concern?
I think Albert was such a dominating player when he wanted to be. And I mean dominating. He was a dominating player when he was motivated. And I think James Pierce is a good player, could be a really good player, but I don't think he can dominate games just because he turns it on. Right. And I think the level of talent's a little bit different. But the work ethic and the questionable stuff is still there. And with Pierce, he's playing a premium position at pass rusher. Somebody's going to take that chance. And the teams that take that chance are the ones that have a locker room that can handle it. Eagles, Ravens, maybe the Bills. The Titans are not one of those teams. They don't have the locker room to handle that kind of player. And really their coaching staff needs to win ball games. They can't rely on somebody that's been unreliable. And I think that's something that they really can't afford to do, where maybe another team, the Chiefs, or Chiefs have had success with some of those type players, can do. And if they don't, you still have an elite quarterback in Mahomes, or an elite quarterback in Josh Allen, or elite quarterback in Lamar Jackson to fall back on. Other teams don't have that. So you kind of sit there and have to really understand what your locker room looks like.
Feel free to throw a question in there. This is the time to ask about your favorite prospect or guy you're concerned about.
I came up with one. Danico Autry, the Titans will know. Danico was a highly recruited player coming out of high school, was a player at when he finally got to Mississippi State, really didn't produce. He really didn't. I remember scouting him. I remember going to Starkville and evaluating him. He had all the ability, but didn't really produce. When he got to the NFL, they started moving him around. He was more of an outside guy at Mississippi State. They moved him a little bit inside and outside when he got to the Colts, and really produced as a player. And now he's in 11th year in the NFL. So that's one player that I would just came to mind that produced on the NFL level that he didn't in college.
Cam Scatterbo, People loved watching him in college, and are really excited about the idea. Titans had him in for a visit. I'm skeptical about a guy like that taking an NFL level beating. What's your forecast for him as an NFL player?
It just so happens I know Scatterboo a little bit. I've got facilities that have prospects that come in, and Scatterboo's one of them. This is a guy that fans will love and coaches will love, and he's a tough dude, and he is all ball. And I'll say this about him. When I talk to players, some of them want to have initial conversations, and then some of them are just all in. Scatterboo blew me up from day one. Wanted to talk all the time ball. Every time I set up a meeting with me, he would come in 30 minutes early and want to talk more and stay late, and he's about it. And those are the type of people you fall in love with. He's tough. He's physical. He's got some twitch and explosiveness to him, even on a shorter frame, compact frame. But he's made for the NFL in a role. Is he going to be a guy that's going to be that full-time, carry the ball 30 times? No, but the NFL doesn't really have that anymore unless you have a certain elite player. So, I think Scatterboo's a perfect NFL player as a compliment, and the team will like being around him because he plays with that edge, he has that edge, and he has the want to be a really good NFL player.
Xavier Restrepo's 40 was like dinosaur level slow. Can a guy with real quickness who can be a Julian Edelman type really fail at a 40 on that level?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, there's been, especially going back to the initial beginnings of the slot guys, especially New England slot guys that they've had for all those years. They weren't high 40 guys. They were not guys that just burned it up. The slots have changed a little bit in the NFL, where it's more of a mismatch position at times, where you will try to move somebody in the slot to pick up a mismatch versus a linebacker or safety, or maybe a nickel corner that doesn't have vertical speed. So there is a little bit of difference like that. But you're talking about someone that can work the inside, and I think there's a value to that player. Is that value in that first 2 days of the draft? Maybe not. Because he doesn't have that stretch of field ability. What'll happen is they'll really cover him up, knowing that he's not going to stretch it vertically, and he's going to have to really be able to separate from the short to intermediate areas.
Tyler Lockett fits what the Titans have been adding in free agency throughout. He plays games. Older receivers are not the direction they want to go, but they need more than one. And they have so many needs, like we've been talking about in the draft. This, to me, right before the draft, signing him eases the pressure at the position. What do you think he will bring them, and how do you like this signing?
Great signing for a good person, good player, reliable. He's always available. He's missed 2 games in his career. He's 32 years old. He doesn't miss time. Hopefully, the age thing's not going to catch up to him. He's got that extra year. But he's been a good slot guy that can actually play outside at times too. So he's not just relegated to slot, but a good, solid player, good hands, good routes, reliable player. Can't ask for a better veteran type presence than somebody that's probably going to be on the field and going to be where he's supposed to be for a rookie quarterback. That is a good signing, minimum salary for what they've offered him. But I think they should expect, really solid production. And like you said, now they don't have to go force themselves to take a player maybe at 35 or in the 4th round just to fill a need. They did that with that 1-year signing. Good pick.
Yeah. So now they look for a number 2 outside guy, but you've got Ridley and you've got Lockett, and find the other guy. Could the other guy?
What they've done so far is Lockett and Van Jefferson. Both good route runners, both reliable hand catchers, and should be where they're supposed to be in this new offense. And for a quarterback, like, I can't overstate that enough. It's so important that the receivers are on the same page with the quarterback. Now the quarterback has 3 veteran receivers for whatever their deficiencies are. They're going to be where they're supposed to be. Calvin Ridley hasn't shown that as much. But he needs to get to that level. I mean, he's a vet. He's got to get to that level. 2nd year in the system should be better.
Jack Bash is going to be where he should be. Is he a little bit redundant with those guys, or does he have enough upside that I think 35 is probably a little high for him? But would you consider him a value, or is he not top endy enough?
I don't think he is at 35. If you traded back into the back portion of that second round, or definitely you had a third round pick, that would be somebody you would consider. But I think you select that type player, not at 35, but you select that type player anyway. But whether you have Lockett or Jefferson or whoever, but mainly Lockett, because he's going to be a solid player. Solid. He's not going to be special, but he's going to be solid. Probably what the Titans tried to do with Adam Humphries a few years ago. Should have been a solid player, but he just had health issues. So, you look at bringing in a player like that. Maybe he can learn behind a Tyler Lockett while he's playing a little bit too. There's nothing wrong with that, especially growing with that rookie quarterback.
A couple other of my favorites I'm going to take advantage of having you. Omar Norman Lott. I mean, he just looks terrific. I know they had a crowd there, and he didn't play a lot at UT, but this guy looks like he can really be something to me.
To answer the question, probably for the person who asked that question about didn't have the great college career that may be a better pro, he's one of them. So he didn't start a lot of ball games. He's got some pass rush ability that he doesn't get to show consistently. Tennessee's front a lot of times was playing the run where their edges were their rushers. He can do a little bit of both. He can play the run, but he also has some upfield disruption ability. So I think he's one of those that's going to be a better pro than he was on the college level, and he's going to be a good player. So I like him, and I think the NFL is seeing that as well, seeing him for the last couple of years. But now the NFL has they're not going to let him get out of the second round.
And how about Jalen Rivers? He seems to me to be an incredibly patient and non-panicky offensive lineman who he's got some long arms, and he seems to be able to get an initial contact to hold the guy off and then use that patience where I just don't see. I mean, I'm not watching extensive film on a guy, but from what I've seen of him, I really like the lack of panic.
When you have a guy with length, he can, in college, play with a little comfort level of not being beat on the outside because you can push him by the quarterback. You can also usually get your hands on enough rushers to where they don't engulf you. But on the NFL level, they're going to get in his frame quick. Now, that doesn't mean he won't be a player. He's going to be a player. But he would be in a good situation with the Titans because they don't need him. They don't have to have him right now. There's a couple of players that I like that they need that third-round pick. That's the problem. They need a third-round pick for some of these guys that they could develop into a Kevin Zeitler position, because he's 35 and he's got a year, maybe two left. And some of these players but they just don't have that third-round pick. So you're going to have to take players at that 35th spot that's going to come in and play.
Who are these offensive linemen that you like maybe to be Zettler's successor in a year?
Marcus Imbo from Purdue is a guy that I think is a starter. He's played tackle, but I think he's going to be a guard in the NFL. I think he's going to be a really good one. He's just a player that's going to be in that mid-second round to third. Anthony Belton from North Carolina State's another one. This is a guy that's got real long arms, good size, good width, moves very well for his size. He's a player that's going to be a starter as well. Probably that late second, early third type range. It's just tough because, you're not going to take him at 35. Mbu, you could take at 35. He may go that high. The problem is that the Titans can't take him that high. I mean, he's just going to be – he will be a starter in the NFL, and if not in year one, but year two for sure. And they just can't afford that with all the needs and the players that are probably going to be at that 35th pick.
Jason asks, what's your interpretation of Brinker consistently emphasizing players with high-level traits? Does that exclude anybody from a draft board in their interpretation? And more broadly, I'm curious, just what do you feel from Brinker and Borgonzi in terms of their strategy that may produce different people than what we've seen more recently?
I think getting players with high-level traits is not a bad thing as long as it's matched with production and the work ethic and all that kind of stuff. If you go on high-level traits like Shamar Stewart, for example, okay, out of Texas A&M, probably going to be either a late first or second round pick. This is a guy that hadn't produced in his career. If you watch him, he's not producing versus good offensive linemen on a consistent basis and really not showing even the consistent disruption. I'm okay with a person that doesn't put up stats as a sack or a tackle for loss guy, but I need to see at least consistent disruption, and I don't see it out of him. Well, he's only going to face better offensive linemen on the NFL level, and he's been facing some good ones. But with the other players around him at A&M are making plays, and he's not, that's a little concerning. It's not like he's drawing doubles. So height, weight, speed, absolutely. But where's the production that goes along with that player? I don't see it. So, those are the ones that kind of concern me a little bit when you just don't see it matched up. Again, I would like to be on that inside and know exactly what makes that kid tick. Is he just in lack of instincts, lack of work ethic? Just not improving his rush repertoire, which is what I see. He just doesn't have a rush game that goes along with all those traits. So, but to get back to your point of Brinker and Borgonzi, you look at some of the players that the Chiefs have taken. George Karlaftis, the defensive end from Purdue, he wasn't really a height, weight, speed guy. He was just an ultra productive guy. Chris Jones kind of had it all coming out of Mississippi State. He was the height, weight, speed guy with the production. So you look at some of the players that they've taken on that defensive side, little mixed bag. Some productive players in college without the height, weight, speed, and some that kind of had it all. Even Nick Bolton, the inside backer, not extremely tall or long, but just a baller. And then he was a baller in college too. So, sometimes it looks like they will side on production than they will height, weight, speed at those positions. But, going back to Brinker too, in his days at Green Bay, they did go with the Rashawn Garys and players like that on defense that did have kind of a height, weight, speed element to them.
Here we are on the first day of the draft. They have all of these needs. I'm wondering what can they live without out of these needs, and what people come now with unreasonable expectations, right? They've got 9 needs. They've got 8 picks. People think the roster is going to be fixed by this. First pick in the draft has to be an answer. 35 has to be an answer. But then when you get 2 fourths, 2 fifths, let's concentrate just on those. What should people reasonably expect out of 2 fourths and 2 fifths? If you find one year one starter there, that seems pretty good. Or 2 guys who are role players and productive there, that seems pretty good. Like, what would you be expecting if you're in the draft room out of 2 fourths and 2 fifths?
If you find a year one starter of a 4th round pick, you really have a bad roster. And that's just the nuts and bolts of it. Or you've just schooled the rest of the league and they bypassed, 32 teams 3 other times. So, you've done one of the other. Okay. Especially in a draft like this, it's not deep in talent. You're going to get some players in certain years where they fall to the 4th round because of whatever. But if you have 2 4th round picks, they're depth players. They should be 2 deep players. In year one, they should play as a backup level. Depending on the position, be a special teams type player, but not a starter. If they're starting, your depth is a concern, and that's what that's going to show. Unless that player was a first-round graded player by the Titans. I mean, I'm going to contradict myself because when we took Daquan Jones out of Penn State, we took Daquan in the 4th round. We had late first, early second round grades on him, and he went in the 4th, and he eventually started. But, those are the rarities. I'll say that was just a different draft where defensive lineman went and he just failed. There's not that depth at any position this year in this draft that you're going to see a first round, early second round guy that's going to fall all the way to the 4th, unless they probably have off the field or medical concerns.
What do you think about Jalen Noel at 35? A reach, or is he, SW wants to know, a reasonable pick there?
I think that's a reach. I don't see him at that level. I see him more as a 3rd. And that's what that means is that just when I talk about value, a first round pick is an immediate starter. Second round pick, especially a high second round pick, should be an immediate starter or right in the beginning of the first year. 3rd round pick, 4th round pick, you're talking about a backup level player. 3rd round pick should eventually arise to a starter, but probably by year 2, 4th, 5th, and it just depends. I'm talking about grades. You're talking about players that have some traits that can at least be a 2 deep player in year 1, but by year 2, be pushing for a position. 6th, 7th round, you're talking about special teams or height, weight, speed type traits that you can develop.
I'll take you out again for a second here while I talk about Zen Sports. We'll be right back with Blake Beddingfield, former Titans scout and current NFL consultant. Zen Sports is the place you need to go to bet. You got a lot of betting possibilities here with the NFL draft starting tonight. Who's going where? What are the odds on it? If you've got strong feelings, this is the place to go, especially if you want to make big bets. High limits at Zen Sports, one of their best features. They're going to treat you like a VIP from the very start, and that's a great feature about Zen Sports. I had Buddy who was sitting with me here at Edley's just a couple weeks ago telling me how he does really well at Zen Sports. He's moved the line there a couple times, and then when his beloved Sacramento Kings come to Memphis, they hook him up with front row seats gratis, and he makes a pilgrimage to Memphis to see the Kings. Why he loves the Kings, I don't know. Zen Sports doesn't know. They just take care of them. They don't care. Zen Sports, go sign up, download the app, sign up, use the code TN Paul. That tells them I sent you there, and they're a great place to bet. They also, I know, have something really big on the horizon, and you'll want to be in ahead of that, which is coming right at the start of May. Zen Sports, don't miss out. Gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 and over in Tennessee to bet. We'll bring back in Blake Beddingfield, former Titans scout, current NFL consultant. Nicholas wants to know, is Brownlee Jr. good, or did the Titans have a bad roster last year?
I like Brownlee Jr. I thought he had all the ability to be a starter in the NFL. He's got speed. He's got quickness. He's extremely competitive. The one thing that he's got to clean up, and maybe he will be between year 1 and 2, he's too handsy. He gets his hands on receivers too much. He gets called for holding. He developed a reputation as the season went along, and it just got more penalties because of it. But he is aggressive. He loves to compete, and you'll love to see that. But he's got the speed, he's got the quickness, he's got some cover ability. I think he can be a starter in this league. So I like that.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I've actually got a couple of more to that question because my brain's spinning. J.J. Watt, a lot better pro player than he was college. Aaron Rodgers, and a really good one, Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara was okay at Tennessee and really went to the league and tore it up. So, those are some other players that had very good NFL careers.
Good job coming up with those. What talked about living without something. Inside linebacker. They've got 3 guys there that could play beside Cody Barton as conceivably 2 down guys. Cedric Gray, James Williams, picks last year, 4th rounder in Gray, 7th rounder in Williams. Otis Reese, undrafted a couple years ago. I think he's played in 30 games. What's your optimism level that they could be sufficient answers at that position, which the team doesn't and hasn't valued through multiple regimes in terms of great draft capital or great finances there? I mean, certainly the second guy at that spot.
I think if you're looking at that position, I would say if it was just one other player at that position, you went out and got Cody Barton, you have Cedric Gray and James Williams, who you took in the draft last year. You're hoping one of those 2 can maybe elevate their game to be a starter and see what they have in year 2. I don't think it's a need position, but it's kind of a need position. But you can't have too many young guys. What are you going to take? A 2nd round inside backer? Probably not. So you're going to take another 4th, which is what Gray was, or a 5th, Williams. You're taking something similar to what you already have. I think you have other places that you could probably spin those picks on instead of another inside backer that may just match up. There is a player that I like for the Titans that could be in that second inside backers, Francisco Moaga, who is actually Cam Ward's teammate at Miami. This is an inside backer that I think has got some upside to him. Extremely smart, plays the game with instincts. Actually timed very well at the combine, jump, all that kind of stuff. But I think he's a player in that third day for sure that should get drafted. And if the Titans are looking for somebody with one of those extra picks, I would select him because I think he could elevate to a starter.
My two guys, Mike Herndon and James Foster, are completely split on Landon Jackson. Herndon loves him, loves the athleticism. And Foster is out on him and finds him to be a big risk. You're the big tiebreaker here for the PaulKuharsky.com analyst community. What do you think of this guy from Arkansas? I like his hairstyle for sure.
Yeah. You know, it's very clean. He looks the part. There's no question. I don't see a consistent disruptor. I see a guy with a lot of height, weight, speed, length. Production is just okay. The last 2 years, I think he's 6.5 sacks both years. Just not a dominating player off the edge. You know, had an injury that kind of hurt him a little bit last year, but came back. I'm not in love with him. I think he's probably going to be more that solid player than he will be a really good player. He's got some traits, there's no question, but I don't see the consistent production that I wanted to see. I was expecting this year maybe because, you know, a year ago he had 6.5 sacks, and this year he followed it up with 6.5 sacks. You know, and he's playing against good tackles, but he's going to play against that next year too. So I just didn't see it. Didn't see it consistently. A little bit more robotic and mechanical than I like my rushers to be. I like them to be more instinctive and go with the flow instead of just trying to work your hands, work a move, that type of thing.
You optimistic or pessimistic or have no idea about L'Jarius Sneed, given the knee he came in with, the quad that he suffered through last year that kept him to 5 games, and now this off-the-field stuff that we really don't know the extent of his involvement based on a public police report having virtually everything in it redacted.
You know, when we just talked about Tyler Lockett as a veteran, we talked about reliable. L'Jarius is showing that he's not reliable, whether it's the knee or the quad or the off-the-field issues now. I thought when he played this year, and I thought he played well. I thought he was playing at a level that was really a solid player. But you're getting a guy that's going to be 28 next year, and he's got a knee issue, and he's got off-the-field issues. That off-the-field issue came when the team was playing still, and he was in a whole nother state. Those are issues, and I don't like that, and I don't see a lot of potential there. I think if they could somehow dump him, I don't think it's likely, but somehow dump him, you move on. But otherwise, you're going to have to see if you can get him back to playing again, because I don't really rely on him. Going into this year, I would sit there and say we have 3 corners in McCrary and Brownlee Jr., and I like Daryl Baker Jr. Those are the 3 that I would rely on. If Snead gives you something, then that's just icing.
Yeah, they can't dump him this year, but they sure could dump him next year. And so, if they can get something good out of him this year, but I certainly think we're going to see a corner coming in this draft that's going to have an opportunity for him. Let's finish up with 2 positions. Tight end. It's harder and harder to find, that on the line tight end who can do for them what they need, but they certainly need to bump Chig and Wiley back a spot if they could. Can they find a 4th round tight end who's going to be a help? Could Ferguson last to then? And how good a prospect do you view him as? Is there a tight end you love here?
I like Araujo. I like Mason Taylor because I think Mason Taylor can do a little bit of both. And I think there's an upside to Taylor. I think there's an upside to Araujo too. But Ferguson's probably that one that could fall to the 4th. Probably more of that 3rd round range, but could fall to the 4th and would be that solid inline guy for him. And has a little bit of upside to him too. I kind of like him, but I think Mason Taylor is a player that I really like. And every time I watch him, I just think he's getting better and better. And I like to see that, continued ascend in his potential. So I really think that's a player but he's not going to be there in that 3rd or 4th round. I mean, 4th round for sure. Probably not in the 3rd either. But I
Well,
like the group enough where there's some depth where you could sit there and say, okay, if I'm looking for an inline guy, maybe I could find one a little bit later.
how much does a good inline guy kind of ease some of the remaining offensive line questions? We haven't talked about. I mean, you seem to like what they or feel. They've got their five anyway. They certainly have their five. How much help should or will these two tackles now need? Are you thinking that Latham on the right is going to be or should be able to be left alone often, and more with the contract he gets? How much should we expect him to be left on an island?
I think Latham is one of those that you could always point to and say he's got a lot of talent. And he does. He's got size. He's got strength. He moves pretty well. He'll be better on the right side where he's more natural, where he played at Alabama. But he still had the same deficiencies on the right at Alabama that he did on the left with the Titans. He got beat a lot with double moves, an outside in move or a speed rush to the outside if he was oversetting on the inside. And that's probably going to get better with more experience. But, they're still going to attack that. Dan Moore's been a pretty solid but not spectacular player, in the league. But I think signing him was a good signing in the sense that, like, they got a veteran player, not trying to invest another draft choice. I like this signing. Don't expect an all-star type player, but expect a solid pro. And that's what you're hoping that he's going to ascend to, as a solid pro where you don't have to worry about it for a few years. And that's really where they should be. So Zeiler's another good signing there. But they're going to have to there's still going to be need for a tight end. I don't care what tackles you have. There's still need. The rushers are so much more athletic than the tackles for the most part in the league that you're still going to have a chip, or you're still going to have help at times. So no matter where you draft the guys or what you sign them to.
Brian Callahan really talking earlier this week, like they're going to be three deep at running back and find carries for all three guys. I'm certainly feeling like Tyjae Spears is, heck, he was getting 6 or 9 tops as it was in a two back thing. It seems like his role is going to be diminished if they find a quote unquote bigger back, or a back that plays bigger and is good between the tackles. They are concerned clearly with wearing Tony Pollard out maybe not over the course of a game, but certainly over the course of a season. What's the ideal if they find? What kind of back do you want? Who do you like? Maybe in the 4th round, 5th round range here that could come in and be a nice compliment to Pollard. And then what's your role for Spears?
I thought the 2 running backs last year were pretty solid. I thought Pollard was playing at a really good level. He kind of wore down toward the end of the year. You saw it. He had a few injuries, but Spears, obviously had a few injuries as well. But both of them, once they could get to the second level, were really good running backs. They were able to make a linebacker miss, run through a safety arm tackle, those type things. I thought both of them ran hard and had a pretty solid game. What they need is somebody that can be a little bit different. Not necessarily, both of those guys can catch the ball pretty well. But maybe like a Devin Neal from Kansas, somebody that is a little bit stouter, better in short yardage situations, take a little bit more pressure off of them, can carry a load if they both get injured. Not a big time speed back, had solid hands, but had production, a lot of production. But probably more that guy in that third day that you could get. And I think that type of player, a Scatterboo, but I don't think he's going to go that far, but somebody that can pound it up in there as well and be a little bit different than what you got in Pollard and Spears, who are pretty identical. Even though they're small, they run hard, but they're quicker than they are more powerful.
Questions in the chat about Tootin from Virginia Tech and Jaden Blue.
I would say both of those guys are day 3 guys. I think when you look at certain prospects, when I say day 3, you're talking 4 through 7. That's a wide range. And I already kind of went over what 4th and 5th are compared to 6th and 7th. So in this draft, those guys, in a normal draft, I think those guys are a little bit later. In this draft, they may be 4th and 5th. So the expectations change a little bit for both in terms of what they're going to give you in year 1. Both should be 2 deep type players and not really ascend to a starting role.
We'll finish up with 2 more. Martinez from Miami. It seems to me like he would be a little bit higher too. Yeah.
Yeah. He should be a little bit higher than that. Again, I think it's one of those players that should be a 2 deep right off the jump. Probably not ascend to a starter until later in his career. And when I'm talking about later, we're not talking about 4th year. We're talking about late second, that type of thing. Because when you're taking a guy on day 2, that's what you should get.
Mandatory UT question: where do you see Dylan Sampson going?
I like Dylan. I think there's going to be a team. The running backs are pretty solid in this draft, and there's a mixed bag. You've got some quicker guys, and you have some power guys, and then you have a guy like Sampson who was a really productive player. And I think he could be a definite number 2 running back in the league in year 1. Could eventually be a starter. So I see him in that late second, early third type range. I mean, he's a guy that I like him. I think he's kind of ascending as a player as well.
All right, let's finish on this. Tonight's going to be about Cam Ward. It's an exciting thing for fans. I think even people that were skeptical about him earlier in the process, as this thing builds, it's the nature of the league. You get excited about your team's guy. You get hopeful. It's the nature of the thing. But I think it's important people have realistic expectations. I think it hurts the guy if people think he's Steve McNair and get on this Air McNair, H-E-I-R, McNair thing. If they have unrealistic expectations for what he can come in here and do from day one and all of this stuff. Help us set like what people should expect for this guy coming in as the new face of the franchise and what's healthy for him from management, from coaching, and even from the fan base.
You would love an old scenario where you could sit him, okay, and let him learn. And then week 5 or 6, he comes in and he plays the rest of the year instead of having to play a 17-game season. I don't see that. I don't see them handing the reins to, Will Levis and definitely not the other guys. But, I see them starting him probably week 1. So he's going to have to play that gauntlet, and that season's tough. So build around him. They did a good job on the offensive line, okay? If they don't go out and improve the tight end position, they have acceptable players at those positions to play. They went out and got Lockett, which I like, and Van Jefferson, and they have Calvin Ridley. I would like to add one more piece to that because I think Pollard and Spears are fine. The third running back is just going to be a third running back, especially where they're going to select him. But add one more piece to that receiving room. And in that second round, really build around the quarterback. Let's do that. That's the number one thing you got to do. I know the potential of selecting an edge rusher or somebody else at that 35th pick is there. And if somebody dynamic, sure. But let's build another player around because Lockett, maybe Ridley, and Jefferson won't be there in 2026. So let's get somebody that you can build with that quarterback. Expectation-wise, be healthy. Okay, let's keep him healthy. Let's put a system in place that's not going to expose him to a lot of extra hits that he's going to take anyway playing that length of a season. Second, let's put that system in that fits him, okay? He can do a lot of things, but not in year 1. That's not what he needs to be doing. He doesn't need to be a 3-level guy consistently trying to stretch the field and show everything he can do. Let's show consistency so he has success, the team has success on the offensive side, and then in 2026 you can really start building around him. You're not going to have a team that competes for the playoffs. That's not going to happen. I don't care what you draft. But let's make this quarterback and really focus on making him the best you can. I don't even care about the wins and losses, to be honest with you. It's just going to be the success that they allow him to have, and the coaching staff stay intact. I said that when you asked me to do a report on him. Don't change coaches on him. The quarterback killers in the first round are because the organization has constant turnover. Do not change. Brian Callahan's your guy. Quarterback coach needs to stay in place. Everybody needs to stay in place and build with this young man.
So go back to the offense and expand on that a little bit. Not 3 reads, you said. How simple in what terms? Offer him easy completions, offer him clear reads, offer him a solid run game. What else?
So you have Pollard and Spears who can actually catch the ball in the flats and do things and have success. You have Chig, who's been pretty successful as a screen tight end guy, a little short to intermediate guy. Okay, he's had that. Offensive line should be better. They're more in their natural positions if Cushenberry comes back. So you have Ridley, who's probably his best route is either a corner or a crossing route where he can get separation away from the corners that they're playing. Well, those are short to intermediate passes. Those aren't always deep, intermediate for sure. What is Tyler Lockett? He's a short to intermediate guy that can get vertical at times. But so they went out and built that. Okay, Van Jefferson, same thing. I had him selecting Jaden Higgins from Iowa State with the 35th pick, and that mock you asked me to do. Another tall, long receiver that can play in that short to intermediate and red zone area. So all things to protect the quarterback. Vertically, you're going to set up passes vertically. You can't play all short to intermediate, but it doesn't need to be a staple of the game in year one. Let's let him grow. Let's let him gain confidence, and let's try to limit as many hits as possible because the game will speed up, and they're going to come after him. And, you want to be able to limit that and be able to get to some of these playmakers they went out and got.
You don't like that McNair comparison primarily because he's not a runner.
No, McNair was a dynamic runner in college. He was Air McNair, yes, because he put up big yards, but he could run for 100 as well. And no, that's not a comparison. No, I don't see that comparison at all. But you look at the Baker Mayfield, who had some success running in college a little bit, but it was more of an escape type thing, get some extra yards. That's why I had the Baker comparison.
Blake Beddingfield, scouted for the Titans for 19 years, spent 6 years as the director of college scouting, consults for NFL teams now, and writes at paulkuharsky.com. I will be integrating his assessment of draft picks as the Titans draft, and then next week he will assess what they did, what they didn't do, and then ultimately assess what the Titans have put together as a roster. Blake, I appreciate your friendship and your work. And this was great. I wrote down, usually during a podcast, I write down like 2 or 3 things I'd like to clip. I just wrote down like 10. And so really, really good stuff. I encourage people to retweet this and send it out. Tell people they need to come watch or listen to what they missed. Really terrific. I appreciate it.
Oh, loved being on. Loved talking about the draft. I wish it was more than once a year, to be honest with you. I love it.
Oh,
so,
God. I wish it was once every 2 years. Great stuff. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Appreciate all of you coming. Please eat at Edley's. I might be on the verge of having. Let me get my notes on this delicious sandwich here. The goodness gracious, the Peppa Pig, pork sirloin, bacon, barbecued mustard, fried cheese on garlic bread. That is hard to resist. Get your account going at Zen Sports. Use code TNPaul. They'll let you bet as much as you want. Lots of great draft bets to be had here. Where's your favorite guy going? You can surely place a bet on how soon or how late he is going to go and things like that. Dive in there. Zen Sports. Use code TNPaul. You got to be a member of paulkuharsky.com. Mike Herndon has his favorites on offense and his favorites on defense up. James Foster, I've got a piece ready to go about if he's up or down on a lot of people that have been connected to the Titans throughout the process. This afternoon, I'll have some final thoughts. Please support the site. Blake Beddingfield stuff coming, as I said, right after and during the draft. Really, $750 a month is a small price to pay. This podcast alone was worth $750. I appreciate all your support. I look forward to seeing a lot of you during the draft. Still, I think a few tickets available for the 440 Sports events, both tonight with a lot of the gang. And then Saturday night, Nick Suss of the Tennessean and I will be part of a large off-the-record conversation about the entire draft and all things Titans. So you can come out and talk about that. Be part of that, ask some questions. Details are on my Twitter timeline and on the private Facebook page for paulkuharsky.com. Yeah, if you came in late, go start this from the beginning. I appreciate you all very much. Don't block the box, and be sure to lock your locks. Cheers. Hit end stream multiple times.